Hi, this is Andrea Kane, and I'm here with you for HIT 452, which is Statistics and Data Analysis. We are on Chapter 5 in our textbook, and if you're taking a look at your syllabus, you'll see we've moved on to Unit Objectives 9.4.1 through 9.4.6. If you want to follow along in your textbook, we are on page 65. And this week is all about length of stay, looking at that for adults, children, and newborns, looking at total length of stay for a group of discharged patients, and looking at length of stay and utilization management. So what is length of stay? It's the number of calendar days that a patient stays in the hospital from admission to discharge. And hospitals use length of stay data for so many things. Odds are you will not be asked to calculate length of stay once you get out into the field, but you'll hear average terms like average length of stay or geometric mean length of stay and different things like that, where we're looking at length of stay information or averages of that when they go with a particular DRG, and how is the hospital's overall length of stay? Is it too long? It's almost never too short, but sometimes it could be. If you think about obstetric patients and newborns, sometimes that can get a little short. But most of the time they're looking at length of stay and is it too long, and have we kept the patient too long, and those types of things, and how does that compare to their DRG? So let's start by talking about discharge days. Discharge days are days of stay for the patient after he or she has been discharged from the hospital. It can also be known as inpatient days of stay, duration of inpatient hospitalization. Every day that a patient's in the hospital is counted as a discharge day except the day of discharge. I know that makes no sense. I didn't write this. It was not my concept. It's very confusing. But when it comes to discharge days, you count every day that they're in the hospital except the day of discharge. So the length of stay for one patient is determined by subtracting the day of admission from the day of discharge. And discharges include patients that were discharged alive as well as those who died. Patients who are admitted and discharged on the same day are considered to have a 1-day length of stay. So one method you can use to do this is you can pull out the handy dandy calendar and you can count it back. So for instance, the example they give us here is it looks like we're in 2019, in March of 2019. Patient was admitted on the 30th of March and they stayed through the 31st, the 1st of April, the 2nd of April, the 3rd of April, and they were discharged on the 4th of April. So you count day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, and this would be a 5-day length of stay, because remember, we can't count the discharge day, which would have been day 6. All right, method 2, you list the dates and you add them up. But again, you got to remember, don't count the discharge day. Method 3, this is where you're adding and subtracting. So you look at the March stay, they had 1 day. Then you had a day where March was transitioning into April. Then you had 3 days in April. And so you add the 1 plus the 1 plus the 3 and get the 5. That can get confusing, but if it works for you, I say go for it. Choose whatever method works best for you, because in the end, that's what you're going to come back to. So whether it's method 1, 2, or 3, doesn't matter. Just find a way to calculate length of stay that is correct and works for you. Another one is to use good old Excel, if that's available, and set up a formula for that. Now moving on to the outpatient side of life. A lot of times they want to calculate time that was spent in an outpatient setting. And this is just pure clock math. It is, all right, the example they give, patient arrived at 8:05, taken to the examiner at 8:22. You just do a simple subtraction that tells you how much time was spent in that particular setting or in that particular process, part of the process. If the hour is different, then you subtract using a similar method to number 3 for inpatient length of stay, and you do it in hour segments. So the example they're giving here is that You subtract 1 hour from 302, which will equal 202. Now the 1 hour 60 minutes you took from that needs to be added to the O2. Time is now 2:62. You can subtract that from the 1:11, and then you get 1 hour and 51 minutes, which is the patient's wait time. Interesting. Personally, for me, if you're going to do that, I prefer to add it up to the 60 and not deal with going above and beyond and doing this kind of subtraction. But again, it really has to be what works for you, what makes sense, that sort of thing. All right, total length of stay is also known as total discharge days. And we touched on this when we did indirect bed count, or I'm sorry, was that last week? We did indirect bed turnover. That's what it was. And we needed to use discharge days, which is same thing as length of stay. So average length of stay is the average number of days inpatients discharged during the period under consideration stayed in the hospital. And here's the formula. It's total length of stay over total discharges. So let's look at this example here. We have a hospital. They had 129,786 total discharge days based on 39,723 discharges for adults and children. And then they had 15,471 total discharge days based on 5,436 discharges for newborns. And this was in calendar year 2020. What is the average length of stay for adults and children rounded to 1 decimal place? All right, so let's start with our numerator. We know that total length of stay is total discharge days. You have to know that. If you don't know that, this won't work. But you've got to know that total length of stay in your mind equals total discharge days. So do we have total discharge days? We do. We know that there are 129,786. And remember, again, they're asking us for adults and children. So we ignore everything that's based on newborns. We want to do just adults and children. So we've got that up here. So that's our numerator. Denominator is total discharges. Did they give us total discharges? Yes, this 39,723. So that's our denominator. You just divide it up, you get 3.2672758. You round it, it's 3.3 days. Okay? So that is average length of stay. It's total length of stay, which is total discharge days divided by total discharges. And it may be easier for you to just say average length of stay is total discharge days divided by total discharges. That's fine, but just make sure you know that total length of stay is total discharge days, because they can ask you one or the other. Or they may put it just like this, where they say length of stay up here, but they put it in discharge days down here. Most facilities don't include newborns in the formula because, again, they have short stays, and they're usually done separately if they're going to do it. A lot of times they pull out newborns and moms when they're doing average length of stays for the entire hospital. You just have to figure out how your facility wants to do it, or what benchmarking formulas they're using. But here's the same scenario, and this time we're ignoring all the adults and children information and focusing on the newborns. So again, it's going to be the total newborn discharge days, or total newborn length of stay, over discharges. So we already know our numerator. It's that total discharge days over the number of discharges. You divide it out, it's 2.8460264, and we have to round it to 1 decimal place, so it's 2.8 days is the average length of stay for newborns in this scenario. And that is it. Length of stay is actually fairly easy to calculate. Your book gives you some good detail, and I would definitely read through it. Make sure you know your key terms, as always, and just practice, 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 practice. Have a fabulous week, and I will see you again next week for week 5, where we will tackle chapters 6 and 7. All right, take care.